Okay, I make it 4 o'clock, so I'm going to start the session. Welcome everyone to our Victorian Terrace Getting Off Gas webinar. This is run as part of the Open Eco Homes series of open homes events, which is run by Cambridge Carbon Footprint. For any of you that are less familiar with Zoom, there should be controls at the bottom or top of your Zoom screen that will allow you a variety of functions, including how you view your screen and how you are viewed on screen. Everyone other than the webinar team has been muted. Please do stay muted unless you're specifically called on during the question and answer session, when you can use your microphone symbol to unmute yourself. So I'll introduce you to the webinar team. I'm Clare. I'm a CCF trustee. I'll be hosting the session. Nicole Dang is another CCF trustee and will be co-hosting. She'll be fielding questions during the Q&A sessions. James and Hannah are our homeowners, and they'll be doing the majority of the talking today. We'll also have a few words from Margaret Reynolds, who was the architect on this project, and Tim Acheson, who was the builder. There's also Vince House from Aereoo available to answer relevant questions during the Q&A session. To give you an idea of how the session will run, and James, if you could just forward on to the next slide, which will show you the session. That's great, thank you. We'll have about 10 minutes on developing the project. Then we'll have a short Q&A session, which will focus on the development side of things. So we'll be prioritizing questions relating to that aspect of the project. So don't worry if we miss your question out. We'll have another slightly longer session of questions at the end, and we can come back to any questions that got missed out in that session. Then we'll have around 20 minutes on details of the project, and then, as I said, another Q&A session and some discussion. About 5 minutes to 5, I'll wrap up the event. I've got a poll, and I'll let you know about some other events that you might be interested in. We will be posting the presentation slides and the recording of this session to the event webpage, and we will also email it out to you. Everyone is muted, but we do want to hear from you. So please write any relevant questions, comments or suggestions in the Zoom chat. We will pick these up during the Q&A sessions. As I mentioned, we are recording the session. So if you don't want to be included on the recording, please just let us know within the body of your comment or question. So I'm going to hand over now to James, who's going to tell us about the project.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm James. So I'm going to tell you about what we did with our house over the last few years. So I'm here with Hannah, my wife, so I guess the first thing to say is what were we trying to achieve? So I was very keen that we try to stop using gas in the house for environmental reasons. So wanted to stop using fossil fuels because we all know how bad climate change is. We also, a priority was using the space that we had in the house better and trying to get an attic bedroom for our son. And also wanting to be sure that it would keep cool in hot summers. Hannah, did you want to say anything about what we're trying to achieve?
I think just to say prior to the project, we were using gas for both cooking and heating. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you mean we had electric cooking?
Yeah, most recently.
Okay. Yeah, we had gas originally, and then we went to induction hob and stuff. Yeah. Okay. And I think we also wanted to keep the character of the house and keep it sort of really nice to live in and maintain some of the nice features of it being a Victorian terrace. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides and just share a quick video and talk you through what the house looks like now. So let's try that. Okay, so hopefully you can see this video. I'm sorry it's vertically, it was done on my phone. So this is as you walkthrough video to show you. This is as you come into our house. So it's an open plan downstairs in the terrace house. You can see these big cupboards that we've got in now. So these were put in as part of the building work where there were chimney breasts. So we'll come back to that as how we're using the space more effectively. And then when I turn around now, you'll see that we've put in ceiling fans. So these are to try and keep it cool in the summer, obviously. And in the background there, you can see one of the inflows for the ventilation system that's been put in. So those are in all 3 bedrooms and also in the living room here. That silver box there is part of a sprinkler system that we had to put in for the fire regulations. And when you come back into the kitchen here, so we knocked through the kitchen and conservatory. We've got a slate floor there with underfloor heating, and that's one of the outflows for the ventilation systems in the kitchen. So it's got a much bigger kitchen than we used to. And going out into the little back garden here, you'll see that we've got the heat pump under the window. So we managed to fit it under the window there. And we've also got a pergola now over the patio. So the idea is that we'll grow some vines over the pergola, and that will keep the ground floor shaded in the summer. So you just got a glance at the back door there. So that's the big Passive House standard back door, a very thick door, and the front door is equally thick. And I'll just take you upstairs to see what happened in the attic. Oh, down in the kitchen, we've got some roof lights, and they've got external shading on, which we'll talk about as well. And we managed to fit an underfloor toilet in.
Understairs.
Oh, understairs toilet. And you can see the ventilation system, the extract in there. So that was all about trying to get as much from the space as possible. And so we go upstairs. We've got the bathroom over the kitchen. The main thing with the bathroom was we had to now fit in a water tank and all the stuff that went with the heat pump, which wasn't there before. So that whole corner you can see in the background there, that was put in as part of the building works. The bathtub had to be moved. So we ended up doing the whole bathroom again. So the heating system is radiator based everywhere apart from the kitchen. And this is one of the new eco-friendly sash windows that you can see. And then this is the landing now. So for fire regulations, we had to have a fire door put in the first floor landing. And it's hard to show on the screen, but that's it there. And there's a little catch at the bottom that will shut it if the smoke alarm sounds. Over the stairs to the attic, we've got a light tube that gives a bit of natural light coming in. So that was a really great idea. Put that in. And then this is the new attic bedroom, just to show that we managed to get quite a bit of space. We did manage to get quite a bit of space, even though it's a very small terraced house. And there's the inflow for the ventilation, just to show you the space with the roof lights. So they have external blinds on, and in the eaves there in the cupboards is the unit for the ventilation system. And there's another unit in the kitchen ceiling as well. So that's the whole of the what we wanted to show you in terms of a quick tour about the house, but we're going to talk about the features later on in the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hand over to Margaret, who's going to talk about how we tried to develop the project and get going through the planning permission process.
Hello, I'm Margaret Reynolds, and I'm just going to talk for a minute, show a couple of slides here. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so James and Hannah were really perfect clients for a green architect, which I am. They were already climate change activists at home and at work. They had an electric car that they had for years, although they mostly walk and cycle everywhere. However, in this case, green enthusiasm wasn't quite enough. We had to get planning permission. So that's what I'm going to tell you about. Let's see here. The ridge of the loft where they wanted this new bedroom was just 1.815 meters from the floor, and you really need a minimum of 2.1 meters headroom. In other words, we needed to move it from 5'11" up to about 6'5". But we knew that raising this ridge was prohibited by the planners in the Newtown conservation area where the house is located. So I want to talk here about how we managed to get planning approval, because actually I think this example could be quite useful. A lot of people live in terraces, and many would very much like to have a third bedroom. So this is a little bit blown up slide, but I worked out a way of getting headroom behind the new ridge, to get a new ridge behind the old ridge and out of view of the street. So I felt the cost of the large cost of a new bedroom was just not justifiable without more headroom. James and Hannah had received 2 detailed pre-app letters in 2015 and 2016. It seems a long time ago. These letters said a dormer window would be detrimental to the character of the conservation area, and that the proposal was an alien form, and that projecting it above the ridge would increase its dominance. This is an example of the kind of formula response you can get. The problem was that small dormers just weren't going to give us more headroom. We decided to go ahead anyway and to apply to change the roof ridge from behind. We reckoned we had nothing to lose, and we studied the rights for planning appeals. Then, for over 2 years, we either visited houses on the street or found successful applications for houses nearby on the planning portal website. So we were able to cite all these drawings and approvals as precedents. In the planning application, we made our case by saying, 1, this is a rigorous eco retrofit. 2, here you have the National Planning Framework. What does it actually say? Planning permission should not be refused for buildings and infrastructure that promote high levels of sustainability because of concerns about incompatibility with an existing townscape. Cambridge Local Plan, 2006, as it was before the most recent one. Policy 3.1 fully supports proposals that reduce energy use, reducing the need to travel by car, reusing existing buildings. So I just note here that planning applications test a new local plan. In my experience, planners don't always have time to study the new policies in depth, and they find it quicker to use precedents, as we saw in the pre-apps. To my mind, this is like driving, but using only the rear view mirror. We also explained about absentee landlords, that most of the property in the road is absentee landlords. We stressed that James and Hannah and their children would be living there. We outlined the damage done to neighborhoods by absentee landlords. And on the loft bedroom, we said, without this loft bedroom, the family would have to move. Yet another owner-occupier on the road would be pushed out, doubtless selling to a developer. We proposed a discrete hip to the dormer gable behind the roof ridge. You can just see it there on the top left. Invisible, really, from the street, that permits this minimum 2.1 meter headroom in a highly insulated roof. We felt that was necessary to make the new loft space usable and worth building. And we have to keep remembering that planners are overworked and underpaid. You could say, with few opportunities for updated training. By the time we submitted this application, we had done our homework, or you could say we'd done the planner's homework. We received planning approval in 8 weeks. So some conclusions. The council does not necessarily stand by pre-apps, either positive or negative. 2, don't limit your investigations to the refusals. Study the approvals. And there's a website for Greater Cambridge Planning where you can find, by searching addresses, what applications are in the public domain. Make your case by citing current planning policy and documents and positive precedents. Make a case beyond your particular design for benefits like sustainability, social issues, the quality of the city center. and do not despair. Planners sometimes allow changes, and if you make a good case, they will listen. So I'll hand back over to James now. I just thought that was interesting to see how we what we had to do before we could get into the building work.
Thanks, Margaret. I mean, so I think what we were trying to communicate in this first section was that this getting the extra bedroom is an environmental action. It's something that allows us to stay living in the city with a family of our size, and it means therefore we don't need to move out to somewhere bigger further out of Cambridge and drive around and those sorts of things. So that's why we've included it in this Eco Homes presentation. Before we go on to Q&As, we just wanted to say something a bit. So Margaret did all this great work with us and taking us towards planning. A couple of things about that stuff before the building work happened. One of the things that I hadn't realized in organizing the project was that there would be significant fees in that phase before we got a mortgage to pay for the building work. So there was significant, particularly structural engineers fees to work out how to do that. So I think that's really important to note. And then the other was the challenge of working out who was going to build this, and the other contractors, particularly who are we going to get the heat pump from. So for choosing a builder, we with Margaret, we put it out to tender. And there were, I mean, I'll come back to Margaret in a minute to say something about how that went. And we've got Tim on the call who ended up doing the project. And we're really grateful that he was interested, wanting to do that, and put in a tender for doing it. But it was really interesting that there were other building firms out there who weren't interested, saw it as too complicated for this size of the building, too complicated and too expensive for what it was. And perhaps didn't have the expertise in the environmental retrofit side of things. So we're glad that Tim was out there knowing what he was doing on this stuff, because I didn't get the feeling that so many of the other firms did. And similarly with the heat pump, we spoke to quite a lot of firms, and quite a lot of them were essentially gas boiler firms that also do heat pumps. And some of them, came out and said they thought we were making the wrong decision going for a heat pump. We explained we were doing it for environmental reasons, not financial. But it was an unusual thing to be doing at that stage, of saying we'd like a heat pump instead of a gas boiler. We ended up going with a company called Aereoo Installer based near Ely, who much more specialised in this, because we felt they knew more what they were talking about and were much more sort of supportive of the project. And it's all working very well so far. Margaret, did you want to say anything about the tendering process?
Yes, we looked far and wide for people who'd built an eco house or had expressed interest, and we got 4 people lined up who said they were interested in tendering. But you can't do this kind of job without a fairly detailed specification and a set of drawings, and only Tim returned a tender. All the others, when you chased it, I mean, they didn't send anything in on the date, and then I chased them and they said, oh, no, one did phone and say, we'd only do this if we were the only ones tendering, the only ones giving the price. We simply negotiate a tender. So it's to get a list of people on a tender at the moment is no simple thing. And fortunately, we've got Tim, but you find we need more builders trained up to do this kind of work.
Nicole, is there any questions at this stage?
So at the moment, we've got a question from Naomi. So if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask the question to Margaret directly, that would be great. Naomi.
Hi, this is a question from Edward and Naomi, actually. And it was to Margaret, actually. Looking at the front elevation, it appeared that the house to the right has a higher ridge line than the one to the left.
Yes.
And I just wondered whether you had thought of applying to raise the ridge line to match the higher of the 2 neighbours.
Right. So as you look at it from the street, there were 4 houses in James's Terrace, and he was the far right house. So next to them is a new house, a different ridge line. So it's a different house. Does that make sense, Edward?
Yeah, so when we first put in the pre-app, Edward, I didn't realize this. I thought we were all one terrace, but it
Right.
turns out they were built in blocks of 4.
Yeah.
So if you look, there are very subtle features on our house that match the 3 houses to the left, but not the house to the right. So they treat that from a planning point of view as a separate terrace. So we are not allowed to raise our ridgeline to match the terrace on the other side.
That was abundantly clear. What was useful, what was tantalizing at that stage, although we really didn't think we'd get it, was this idea that you could put something on a slope so that you got the headroom, but it is invisible from the street. Is that true, James? I mean, nobody's ever been able to see anything that we've done back there.
Well, no, so the way you've done it, Margaret, they can't see because it's all behind, it's all set back.
It's behind the ridge and it slopes up. There's a little fillet gable that slopes. I can put the picture up again. And you just, it's invisible. And the conservation officer, when he came around, he said, well, if you're going to try and get higher headroom, this is the way to do it. You can't see it. And I think the thing that actually turned out to matter was that there was not a common passage between James's backyard and the house behind them. So nobody public could stand there and look at this offensive alien dominating little gable. And in the end, I think it really was a combination of saying, look, what do these things mean in the planning policy if these people are going to be told they have to move? And it worked. What we didn't even bother to ask about breaking up the ridge of that little 4-house gable, 4-house terrace.
I had asked in the first pre-app before we got you involved, Margaret, so years before. The other thing I was going to say, which I hadn't appreciated and we added in, was are they called mansards, Margaret? The bits at the side that come forward.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's the dormer in the middle, but then the sides we were able to bring forward a bit, so that gave a bit more space as well.
That's a very useful technique. And we discovered, looking through all these permissions, that you could go straight back from the ridge. And as long as you put some sort of little gable on the end, you could get all that as a flat roof. And it doesn't even show. So we did that literally. And the gable is a bit higher than that. And it's really only about 700 or 800 deep, actually, and it's mostly mansard, but it doesn't read like that.
You'll maybe when we talk to Tim later about the building work, it still was very tight up there, all the heights.
Yes, I have a wonderful picture of Tim, which I should have got out, saying it's just clearing my hair. Yeah.
Nicole, was there anything else?
Well, there's a comment from Nicola, and she simply says, "That's amazing, Margaret, a new precedent."
One reason why I want to say this, try it. You've got this as a precedent.
Right, so I think we're okay for questions now. So if we'd like to move on to the next section.
Yeah, I'll go back to my presentation. So we were just going to talk through some of the features of the house and in a bit more detail, really to set it up for more questions to see what people are interested in. So as I've already said, I think we thought the getting more space and using the space more wisely was an important sort of feature, both for just practical living, but also for an environmental reason. So you can see the attic bedroom that we've talked about on the photo on the right. On the left, these built-in cupboards that we've got, it was actually partway through the project that we decided to take the chimneys out on the suggestion of one of the building team. And we're so grateful we did. It's made so much space, which we'd also lost from taking putting a toilet under the stairs. So it's been really useful. And that's also additional space in the bedrooms all the way up to the attic. So that was another really important thing. Hannah, did you want to say something at this stage?
I think one of the things that I wanted to ensure was that we kept some of the sort of characters and features of the house. And actually the chimneys had already been blocked in, so we weren't sort of losing cast iron Victorian chimneys. But I think the cupboards that we've got now actually give the room the same feel because they're the same shape. So I think that's quite useful. Yeah.
So one of the things of putting the attic bedroom in was that because of building regulations and fire regulations, we had to either block in the exit all the way from the attic all the way out to the front door, or get this sprinkler system. So we went for the sprinkler system so we could leave the stairs open. It was just to say that we've done that, and there's a fire door on the landing as well. The sprinkler system has these silver boxes on the walls, which I thought was where the water was going to squirt out with, but Margaret tells me that's the switches to stop the water squirting out when it squirts out the things on the roof, but on the ceiling. Hopefully we will never experience that. Hannah, you were going to say something about the fire doors.
Yes, we were pleased to be able to reuse a lot of the original doors that we had in the house already by repainting them with fireproof paint, which seemed to meet the building approval. And that's actually a new door that our carpenter built, which we were very pleased with. Also, I think, again, sort of trying to get some of the Victorian features. So we have exposed the original Victorian floorboards on the first floor, which is a place where for heat conservation, it doesn't really matter. We're quite happy. We're not losing heat anywhere because we're happy for the heat to go up and down between the floors, but we're not losing the heat externally. So it sort of allows us to enjoy an original feature without losing heat.
So we've got insulation. So we put internal insulation at the front because we weren't meant to change what the house looked like at the front, but at the back we've got external insulation. So that's a shot of the back of the house, and the brick on the right is the neighbouring house. So you can just see how thick it is there. I'll turn to Margaret later on if anyone's got questions about the technical, or Tim about the technical stuff about which insulation we used. But we'll come back to that, I think. So we did quite a lot of air tightness testing. So someone came in with, it was a really interesting process to see. I didn't know this existed. Essentially what you do is you seal up the windows and doors. So you put, and then you put a big, a fan in the back, a unit in the back or front door that sucks the air through and measures the pressure of the air drawing through the house. So they did that before and after and during the house. And they were able to make some improvements, but I know there was an awful lot of work towards the end of the project to try and seal it up, because there was quite a lot of complications with the party wall between us and this other terrace on the right of the house as you look at it from the front. And I think that was possibly linked to taking the chimneys out. So it was no simple matter trying to make it airtight, but I know that Tim and the team made a huge effort to do that. So we're really grateful for that. As I said, we got Passive House standard doors and windows. So we got a very thick new front door, thick back French window door at the back. We've got 2 roof lights in the attic and 2 in the kitchen, which are Facro roof lights, and they're high spec ones. They also have external blinds built in that I'll show later. And those attic ones have blackout blinds inside as well, which is good for our son to get to sleep, although I'm not sure how much difference it makes. And then for the back windows, we went for high spec sash windows. So obviously modern, not like the old ones, but still there's that sort of sash format. So we've got an Aereoo ventilation system. So this is a mechanical ventilation system with ducts, but it's not a heat recovery system. On the left, you can see the inflow that I showed in the video. So there's one of those units in each of the bedrooms and one in the living room. And then we've got the outflow from the bathroom, the toilet, and the kitchen. And this right-hand picture is the unit that is in the attic, drawing the air out through the ducts to put out through the roof of the house. And there's a similar thing in the kitchen ceiling that goes out through the back wall of the house. So we can come back to that in question and answer. As we said, so we've got a heat pump now instead of the gas boiler. So this is the heat pump in the garden under the kitchen window. Before we started, there was lots of conversations about, would it fit under the windowsill? What would the noise level be? How far was it from neighboring houses? Because in this tight sort of urban situation, that might be a consideration. but actually it's not very noisy at all, and it fitted really well. I think we dropped the patio slightly to be sure, but actually you can see there's lots of space there. And then all the equipment that goes with it has gone into a cupboard in the bathroom, which required a water tank. So we didn't have a water tank before we had a combi boiler. So that's taken up that corner space in the bathroom, which is that photo on the left. Did you want to say something?
No, I think it was quite tight getting it in the cupboard. We were just sort of aesthetically, we were a bit worried about the size of the external unit in the garden because we've got quite a small garden, but actually it seems to fit in quite well.
Yeah. And this is a nibby, isn't it? So,
yeah.
I mean, I didn't know anything about the brands. That was another conversation we found ourselves having a lot with suppliers beforehand. And a lot of the suppliers seem wedded to particular brands. I think Eco Installer do a couple of different brands, and they suggested nibby, and it seems to work very well. We haven't lived through a winter with it yet, so we don't know. And we've only really had the heating on in the last week, but it seems to be heating the house up nice and warm, and it's done hot water ever since we moved back in June. So that seems to be working well. The other thing I was concerned about was how hot the house might get in summer. So we've installed these ceiling fans in the downstairs, and they are great. We used them when it was hot this summer, they're just great.
I think you can use them in the winter as well in reverse to move the heat around.
Okay.
In some technical
We haven't tried that yet.
No.
So we've got those fans in the downstairs and just some plug-in fans upstairs. And then in terms of shading, we've got the pergola in the garden, so we're going to grow a vine over it, and we've actually got a shade cloth that we put up this summer.
So just to say, the house is south-facing, so the back of the house and the garden get very hot typically. Yeah.
And then you can see this photo on the right. That's a roof light with the external blinds. So it's very easy to get external blinds for these roof lights because they come as an option when you order the windows. But what's not easy is getting external blinds for the vertical windows on the back of the house, the south facing. And we tried to shop around for these and tried to look for some, and all we could find were very, very expensive, thousands of pounds, essentially set up to sell to commercial buildings. But when we looked more widely, we found that you could buy this shade cloth essentially in other countries. So in Australia, America. I think at one stage I was trying to translate Spanish DIY websites to find it. So we ended up buying this shade cloth, this Aereoo is this brand we found from Australia, I'm afraid to say. So it came all the way from Australia, but you can see Hannah's cut it and hemmed it into a rectangle, and we've fixed it onto the back of one of the windows. So that's just with elastic bands in the corner, and we can just hook them up, and we're going to get 2 more for the other 2 back windows. And you can see the left-hand photo is what it looked like inside. So it's obviously blocking the view. It's quite dark, but it's cutting out an awful lot of the shade.
Heat.
You want to say anything else?
No, they were very cheap and easy to make, and much cheaper than and you can take them. I mean, because we've only used that for the sort of hottest days this summer, so they're not very easy to take down and put up.
You mean they are?
They are very easy to take down.
They just hook on. So yeah, we'll only put that up on the hottest days when we're really worried about the house overheating. But it's just a shame you can't buy the shade cloth in the DIY stores in the UK yet, or maybe you will be able to soon. Who knows? So that's all I wanted to show of the features. And I was going to see if Tim's on the line, whether he wanted to say something from his point of view about what it was like to build the project, and yeah, any thoughts he had for other people thinking about doing this work.
Hello, I'm Tim Acheson from Green Hat Construction. From what I've been listening to, a few things. Thanks for your kind words, James and Hannah. What I didn't realise that I was the only builder that put a price in, so next time it's going to be at least 100 grand more than it was. It was obviously a small house with constrictions, height constrictions, and Margaret did a fantastic job to cheat space. But this is what made it a complicated build, in that the roof design wasn't easy, and the reality was even less easy than the design. You're dealing with the building control officer, who isn't at all movable. and we had a few small redesigns whilst we were on site to be able to cheat some space to make sure that we passed building control as well as any planning constraints. And we did manage to cheat the ridge up slightly more and still not have it visible from the street, which was the planner's main issue. And from what Margaret said early on, she mentioned about needing 2.1. When you think about your loft conversion, you need 2.1 once it's finished. You might get a building control officer who says you can have 2 meters, but that's from plasterboard to floorboard. And when you do a loft conversion, you're often insulating on the inside underneath your new roof timbers, and you're often have raised the floor level from the ceiling joists that were in there. You've put in floor joists which are deeper, and so you've come up. So your starting point to get that 2.1 is often quite a bit more in terms of what you need. Here we have gained from 1.8. We've probably had to actually get to about 2.4 in terms of how much extra we needed to find. It was a tricky build of angles and getting water off from bits that ran in the wrong direction, but we managed to find ways of doing it. And the air tightness was tricky at the top, but the mistake was made on the change from the chimneys, and there was a detail which was missed, and we did have some air escaping. Part of the problem was that it being the end terrace, and then another terrace had been built on the other side of that, there was actually about a 50mm gap between the two buildings, which ran all the way up like a chimney to the roof level, and went out the top. Which, but we did some remedial work and we managed to solve most of the problem. I don't think we quite solved all of the problem. What else can I say? It was the other problems, I would say, with it being a small house were the with so much new infrastructure, ventilation, and your new heating runs and pipes. We've put in steel and things to pick up the new structure, and you've got to have routes to get your new ventilation out, and you've got to have routes to get your new pipe work in. So it wasn't too much of a headache. There were a couple of holes drilled in. There were a couple of large holes drilled in one of the steels and reinforced so that the steel still had its integrity to get Vince's air extract pipes out, which perhaps weren't self-evident, but these were things that had to be thought of during the build, because it wasn't self-evident until you get on site, and it hardly ever is evident until you get on site how tight things are going to be. But this being a small 2 up, 2 down, these problems were heightened. But there is always a way around it, and it is always good to deal with people who, such as Vince, who know what they're doing, so that you can start at the beginning of the process. You can think these things through, so that you're not trying to cram it in last minute. It's very important to get all of those details thought through when you're doing your demolition, after you've done your demolitions and you've started putting the structure back in. Then the rest of it is probably fairly easy building work. We did come up with an insulation change on the outside in conjunction with the suppliers of the insulation system, because we wanted to get the best external wall insulation that we could. But there is a problem with the board that provides that external wall insulation, in that it's a rigid board, and it doesn't necessarily sit exactly, each board doesn't necessarily sit exactly level with each other. And when you're only putting on these very thin 6mm renders, you can end up with bits where it's thinner and bits where it's thicker, and you can get lines coming through later, and it's not a good finish. So it's always the best product to actually finish it is polystyrene, but the polystyrene doesn't provide as good an insulation. But we came out with a way of using the Cooltherm K5 insulation board in conjunction with a thin bit of polystyrene, so that we could get the finish that we wanted with the better insulation behind, and that was signed off by the insulation firm, so that it was we weren't causing any other problems. And actually, it's something I would do again. It's gonna it seems like quite a good idea and quite a less expensive way of solving that problem, because there are other ways, but it worked well. Most of the rest of the build would be the same as any problems that you would find on any building site throughout the country, but they're all there to be overcome, and hopefully to make a nice finish. I see that Hannah's been very busy with her wallpaper and decor. That all looks very good on those cupboards behind you.
Yeah, it does.
Thanks, Tim. We were going to say a couple of words about what it's been like to live in the house since June. Margaret, did you have anything you wanted to add at this stage?
Well, there are just some points that come up. The wall insulation inside, I said I would show this, is, I don't know if you can see, very thin. It's called aerogel blanket, so this is soft blanket, and then magnesium board, which is very strong and fireproof. And it's called Space Therm, and we put that on the front wall in the 2 bedrooms up there.
It is frighteningly expensive.
Yes, but in a terrace where you have mostly sidewalls and you're insulating the back, the cost of the material is probably less than the labor. Wouldn't you agree, Tim? You might as well go for the best material, since you're going to pay people to put it in if the area of it is small. It's when you have acres of it that it starts to really mount up.
Yeah, it was certainly a good solution in this instance. You're going to think about it if you've got large acres to cover.
Yeah, and it doesn't affect the moldings that are already on the wall very much, and we were able to move such electric sockets as there were, which there weren't that many. So again, it's because it's a terrace. It was a small amount of work. And the air tightness, the chimney breast being a surprise, and I was coming to site about every month. Actually, what would have been a good idea with hindsight always is to have repointed that masonry and used a wet plaster parge coat. But we were looking at insulation to keep it warm in the loft and on all that cold wall. So anyway, that's what I've made a note of next time to do, or to look at beforehand, and probably could have done the air tightness test sooner after that. We might have picked that up. When you do external wall insulation, we were looking at the bathroom roof anyway, because we weren't sure what we were going to find up there, and it needed insulating. The bathroom was very cold. We ended up extending the bathroom roof over the wall insulation and extending so that the eaves, which is where the gutter runs on top of the kitchen, and then along the verge, which is where the gable end is. And that makes a really nice job. Otherwise, if you have external insulation, you have to put a plastic cap on it, and then your old roof ends short of it, and it really does not look as nice. So that was something that you can barely tell from the photographs unless you look really carefully, because it looks just the same. But to do those roofs in advance of the external wall insulation makes a really good job. I was just going to say about the external blinds on the roof lights, that you can put those in place at the beginning of the summer, say, even if it's not particularly warm, and leave them. You're not having to keep putting them in and out, although you can. So you could just do it for the warm season, which makes it, because they're not really disruptive, you hardly see them, and it keeps the room cool whether you're there or not, and whether it's sunny or not. So thanks. Those are my comments.
Great. So okay, so we're going to go to questions in a moment. I just was going to quickly show one more photo. which was this, and just say about living in the house. So we've really liked living in the house since we've moved in. As we said, it was cool in hot weather, and we're just starting to use the heating system now, and it seems to be warming up nicely. The kitchen is a really nice space now. It's much bigger because it's the full width of the house, whereas before it was a small half-width kitchen. And yeah, it's just really good, and all the design that Hannah's done, and obviously all the work that we just heard about from Tim and Margaret to keep it sort of well insulated and nice to live in have made it really good. So I'm certainly really happy with it. Hannah, did you want to say anything about how living in it?
It's very good.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything about the kitchen or anything?
I don't think so. I think there are little things like, so we, I think as part of building regulations, we had to have a fire door between the kitchen and the living room, or alternatively have additional sprinklers. And we went for the fire door, which has actually been really useful because it's sliding. It means we've got an open space, but it's quite useful to be able to shut it and separate the space off. So
that's the photo on the right, isn't it? So you created this pocket for it to hide in, which is amazing. So all these little things.
I'll just say you chose a lovely fire door, but the beading for the fire door glass didn't fit inside the fit inside the profile for the sliding fire door, so we had to make some adjustments.
Okay, well, it's very nice now.
Thank you.
So we should stop and go to question and answer now. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. So if we can start with Nicola's question about cupboards. If you can unmute yourself, Nicola, please.
Yeah, I'm sure you have got this right. I think I can see now you have, but I have seen cupboards where they've converted it from something like a chimney breast, and it's on an outside wall, and it's not insulated properly, and consequently that cupboard is horribly cold and gets horrible mold. So was it on an outside wall, and what did you do?
I mean, I don't know whether Tim or Margaret want to say it. Those cupboards are on the wall that's between the end of terrace wall, as it were. So with that 50mm gap. Tim, is there insulation behind the cupboards?
Well, so what there is, the honest truth is I can't remember. I think there is. I think it went all the way. It went all the way down all the walls. But there is a 50mm gap. But when we knew, we also then insulated that gap at the top of the roof line, so that because we couldn't get insulation all the way down, but hopefully we're just making it less of a cold space.
And
so that's what I understand is they put vermiculux particles in the chimney
at the top, what's left of the chimney,
and then also down the gap.
Not really. We use just stuffed fiberglass, I think, down the top. And the chimney breast wall that was exposed by taking the back of the chimney wall, they put insulated plasterboard on there, and that wasn't as airtight as we thought it might be.
And they cut with so we've also got quite a lot of storage in the attic because the ventilation system doesn't take up very much room in there, and so that's all part of the insulated. The attic cupboards are all part of the insulated room. So that's warm storage, not cold storage. Is that right?
Sorry, it's
I was just saying about the storage in the attic under the eaves. The cupboards were made.
Oh yes, it's warm. Yes, that's warm.
That's warm. Yeah, not cold. And and so I guess the other thing which might bring us on to the other questions is that the other important thing for not getting the mold is the ventilation system. So was there a question about that, Nicole?
Yeah, so Tom's asked about ventilation system choice. So Tom, do you want to unmute yourself, please?
Sure. So thanks a lot for, really inspiring to see what you've done. But tell us about why you chose not to have heat recovery in your ventilation system.
If I go first, and then maybe Margaret, and then I don't know if it might be there's Vince from the ventilation system company on the call as well, I think. So sort of the headline thing was mechanical with heat recovery. So two things. Well, first of all, we looked at in-wall units, and Margaret might say something about what she found out about those.
Yeah.
And then we looked at full vented systems with a big unit to do the heat recovery. And the two barriers to that were, one was space, so that we had no idea where we would put a unit of that size in this project. And the other was that it was going to add several £1000s to the cost at a stage where we were already sort of pushing our limits. So we went with a mechanical system, but not with heat recovery. Margaret, is that a good summary?
Right. Okay. So we started off with what seemed logical, which was in-wall, separate heat recovery ventilators. But I had a long discussion with people at the AECB conference, and they said they're too small to actually empty the room. They say they do, but we have tested them and they simply don't. They're not big enough to clear the whole room. And such heat recovery as they put back doesn't have much of an effect, really. Basically, you've got a machine that is not doing the full job in a room. So we then backed off and went to the demand control ones. And Vince can tell us about this, but demand control at the moment simply has humidistats on the wall vents. And if it's damp, those open up the wall vents for fresh air. But a heat recovery system has to deliver the supply air by a heat exchanger, taking out the heat from the exhaust air. So that's why the heat recovery systems are big. And that means internal ducts to every room. And that, even if we'd had room to squash the machine up in the loft there, the mechanical heat recovery box up in the loft, it's the ducts that would have had to run through rooms to get to, all apart from it costing a great deal for the kit itself, the duct work would have cost a lot too. So I would like to know from Vince when he's going to give us a demand control that's neat like this one, with the two exhaust things in the kitchen and the attic, drawing up through a single duct running between those two, which is in the floor of the bedrooms, the middle floor, the living room ceiling. And I'd like to know when it might be possible to get heat recovery from a system like that.
Wow, great question. Yeah, firstly, Margaret, thanks for that. I think that's a very eloquent answer. And in actual fact, Margaret was brilliant to work with on this project because she engaged with us extremely early, and I think Tim had mentioned that the house being so compact, it really did bring some challenges in terms of running services. And I think I must have spoken with Margaret for maybe 2 or 3 hours over design and where units are going to go, and you know, understanding which way joists were running and this big steel that was in the way. So it was one of the keys to having a successful conclusion to this project, I would say. And it's a very charming house as well, I might add. Hannah and James, nice to see it finished. I think with any ventilation system, I mean, I might actually join in a bit later on next year and do a session on ventilation in a bit more depth. But with any property, you really sort of have to look at the whole house solution, you know, the holistic approach and what actually fits best within that property. And space was a real challenge. I think I like to think that Hannah and James are happy with the solution on that side, and we'll certainly, the system will be tested over the winter period. But I think sort of the hang up on something that recovers heat, you'd be surprised actually what little difference there is between a system that intelligently ventilates each room according to its demand versus a heat recovery system, which actually is not necessarily intelligent. It will just ventilate the whole house regardless of what's going on, but then recover some of that heat and sort of send it back in. So there's a couple of different, I suppose, a couple of different ways that you can ventilate a property. That first and foremost, indoor air quality has to be the most important thing. Second to that is making it as efficient as possible. So I think actually that's been achieved on this project for sure.
Thank you. So I just wanted to follow up with a question from Tamsin. A quick one. Can you tell everyone who the door and window manufacturers were?
Yeah, so the Margaret helped us with this, but essentially you got them from the Green Building Store, didn't you, Margaret? I don't know the brands for the doors and windows. I mean, apart from the roof lights were Aereoo. So I don't, Margaret, do you know, did they come with a brand, or was it just?
The Green Building Store has their own windows made in Lithuania. And they are increasingly well priced now. They will do either the straight passive house, which James and Hannah had for the doors, and for the kitchen and the bathrooms, and they will also do historically satisfactory proper sliding sash windows that are not quite passive house standard, but
they won't anymore. They no longer do sash windows.
Oh, right. So we got those.
Because they can't get them to meet passive house as they had them, then they no longer do sash windows.
Right. So, but these were, they did these, and so you're finding this,
and shortly after they've stopped doing sash windows.
And we've had a problem with one of the sash windows, haven't we? With the was it, I don't know, Tim, was it the spring or something that we've had to get it fixed?
It's the spiral balance keeps going, and so we're in talks with Green Building Store at the moment about getting one of their, because we keep going and fixing it and putting it back, and I've had joiners and all sorts of people there, but every time you do it, it's quite an operation, and actually it keeps going, and it's a fault with the spiral balance, not with the not with anything, you know, fitting windows.
Because I think I was quite keen to keep the sash window look of things, and we sort of didn't think they would make a massive difference to the heat loss from the house. But I don't know whether you've got an opinion on this, Tim, but the windows, because they're triple glazed, they're just very heavy. So I don't know whether that's why the spiral balances go.
It may well be, and the last time it went, it's gone on the other side, and Joe, the joiner, has said that he doesn't understand why it's gone on that side, having fixed it last time, because that's not the side where you're fishing for it. That's the side where you can see what you're doing. So they need to come and
hopefully they'll fix that. So there's a slight teething problem.
So I mean, I think it's fair to say there's some. We'll see what happens with the sash windows. The roof lights and the doors have been fine, and they're really good. I think,
just to say, as far as I'm aware, it's not problems with the sash windows as to why Green Building Store have stopped doing them. It's because Green Building Store have got a reputation now for doing passive house, and of being all their windows are now up to passive house standard, and that is what they sell. And these windows didn't meet passive house standard; they're just below.
I don't think you
stop doing them.
I don't think it's. I think it's virtually impossible to meet passive house standard with a sliding sash. So they were very good ones, triple glazed. And as you say, they're discontinuing them. Is it all three windows?
Sorry, can I just interrupt briefly?
Yeah.
Can I just say it's very nearly 5 o'clock, and I'm just conscious that there may well be people that need to leave. Yeah. So the webinar team is available to stay on for another 10 or 15 minutes and continue discussions. But I would just like to say a few things before potentially other people do leave. So I've got a poll for everybody. Okay. Let me just get that up. So that should have launched now. You should see that now. So this is one of the mechanisms that we give feedback to our funders. So if you could all answer that, it's just the one question. So it's fairly straightforward. I'll just give you around a minute. It looks like about half of you have voted now. So this is obviously the main sort of purpose of us doing these sessions to try and inspire people to build their own eco home. So I really hope that you are inspired. I know it's certainly given me lots of food for thought. So thank you so much to James and Hannah, as well as to the other experts, for telling us about this. I think people are almost done. I've got 17 out of 22 have voted. So if the last couple of you want to vote, please vote now. Okay, I'm going to end polling. I'm going to share the results. So you can see that 89% of you are much more likely, more likely to create their own eco homes. So success, that's nice for us to hear. So that's great. I will stop sharing the results and close that down. So I'm glad that many of you were inspired. If you do need more inspiration, we've got lots more sessions like this one coming up throughout October. If you were interested in the insulation and heat pump aspects of the session and want to know more, we've got a specific insulation session on the 6th of October, and then we've got a heat pump session on the 12th of October. If you're really excited about seeing these real live homes and sort of want to hear more about the nitty-gritty reality of creating these homes and living in these homes, then we've got plenty of those as well. We've got Mark Brinkley's self-build on the 1st of October. We've already run that session once, which went terrifically. It was very interesting, so I highly recommend it. And we've also got Country in the City on the 5th of October, and then there's several more after those. I'm going to try and post some links in the chat comments so that people can book onto those if they like. We're also just about to release 3 thermal imaging sessions, which I believe will be throughout October. And in those sessions, you'll learn how to use a thermal imaging camera. And afterwards, you'll have the chance to actually borrow a thermal imaging camera from us so that you can work out where the heat is leaking from your home. And my understanding is that the cameras, we've worked out a way to deliver those to you and pick them back up in a COVID safe way. So I had a look earlier, and the thermal imaging sessions aren't live on our website yet, but we anticipate they will be within the next few days or perhaps the next week or so. So I'll post the link in chat and you can have a look at those. Last but not least, Open Eco Homes is a project of the charity Cambridge Carbon Footprint. Online donations really do help us to do more work like this towards net zero carbon in Greater Cambridge. I think Nicole is going to be posting a link in chat to donate, so please do donate if you're able to. So that's kind of the formal end, but we are happy to stay on for another 10 minutes or so afterwards to continue the questions. I can see there are a few more. So I'm going to hand back over to Nicole, and please, if you've got questions, continue to post them in the chat, and Nicole will continue to farm them out to the appropriate people.
Nicola had quite a few questions about the RECO system. So Nicola, if you want to unmute yourself and direct it to the panel, that'd be great.
Hi, it's a long time since I've looked at Aereoo. I did see it at a show once, and I can't quite remember. Specifically, you say it's a mechanical system, but it's demand controlled. So does it use power all the time, or only when the ventilation is needed? And do you have a diagram, because I don't quite understand where it's going in and where it's coming out, and what's in the wall and what's central? I'm a bit confused.
Sure.
So I have a drawing which Vince drew on top of to show that the essentially, Nicola, you have to imagine this: the first exhaust is basically on top of the refrigerator. It then nips through the wall and picks up the understairs loo and goes straight upstairs and picks up the bathroom, and then it goes along the ceiling of the
Margaret,
back bedroom. Yeah.
They're separate. The downstairs one above the fridge does the kitchen and the understairs toilet and goes out through the kitchen, and is separate to the one that's in the loft, which does the bathroom on the first floor.
And the understairs loo is which one?
is on the ground floor one that's in the kitchen.
So,
Oh, it's taken from the kitchen. Okay.
So is there a little fan in each of these separate things?
so there's two units that make a small bit of quiet noise. One in the kitchen ceiling that does the outflows from the kitchen and downstairs toilet, and one in the attic which does the outflow from the bathroom and takes it out through the attic roof.
Yeah.
They're the only three outflows from the house, and then there's there's four inflows, one in each, four vents which are not connected up to anything else, one in each bedroom and one downstairs.
So the vents are completely passive, and it's the extracts that are powered. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
Yeah, okay,
humidistat
that makes
driven,
sense.
and they let fresh air in from outside.
Makes sense.
But the duct, which you'd mainly, if you had heat recovery and we were delivering air from inside, you'd need ducts going to the living rooms. The living rooms have them on the external wall, and the main duct from the bathroom goes through the ceiling of the small bedroom and the front bedroom, and then up into the loft. So it's a very neat
So
design.
I live with this system, but I don't really know how it works. So Vince, so how do the things that take the air out of the bathroom and toilet and kitchen know when to turn on and off? Is that motion sensor or something? It seems to go on when I go in the bathroom.
There's a couple of things. I mean, firstly, the fans are constantly extracting. The rate in which they extract is all dependent on the moisture in the air. So what the grills are doing, whether that's to allow the air coming in or extracting the air out, they are constantly changing. Every second they will respond to a half a percent change in humidity. So their range is really from 35% relative humidity to 75. So anything below 35%, they're just more or less shut off. And then they gradually open up until they're at 75% humidity, and then they're fully open. So what that actually means is that they can vary the amount of volume that's required on a room by room basis. So if you put that into, I suppose, if you're sleeping in the bedroom at night, that space will require more ventilation. So the inlet will open to allow for a greater amount of air to come in. That in turn, the moisture, the excess moisture will be sucked to the nearest extract. And that in turn will, as it's detecting the additional moisture, will increase the volume rate as well. So you end up with a kind of self-balancing system. Although they're not talking to each other, these components, they've all got a job to do in their own right, and they all work collectively to deliver the best indoor air quality as and when it's needed. So they can actually be really efficient because they can go below the requirements laid out by building regs, because building regs essentially is just a guess at what the property needs. If you have a system that pinpoints the exact moisture in each room, then you can efficiently extract that excess moisture accordingly. I mean, it's still really relatively unknown in the UK, even though it's been going 35 years, and I think 7 million homes have been installed with this system. So you're sort of joining quite a big club, really, there, Hannah and James. But it's a different take on it, and certainly from a retrofit perspective, the lack of additional ducting to supply the air as well really makes it good. And I didn't mention earlier, but Tim did an absolutely amazing job on this. Partly I go around and commission the systems to make sure that they work, because fundamentally the biggest issue that we have in the ventilation industry is it's not really being policed. And, we're not checking systems to make sure that they're delivering what they are, what design rates were actually proposed in the first place. But Tim did an amazing job, very easy to work with. And I probably didn't acknowledge that when I was chatting earlier. So, yeah, considering new to the system, I think he did an amazing job. made my life easy anyway.
Thank you. So Rachel had a follow-up question about the filters. Do you want to unmute yourself, Rachel? And then I'll come to Colin and Sandra next, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they had a filter like for pollen or anything like that for the air coming in, and whether they needed changing.
That's a great question. No, they don't. There's no filters on the system. I mean, you are effectively bringing in air directly from outside. I think it's kind of key to note that the volume of air that you're bringing in is specific to what the requirement is as well. So perhaps with fixed rate systems, you might have to bring in quite a lot of air to distribute amongst the house. So with that additional air coming in, it can actually create, much more volumes coming in, whereas this one, it's a bit more pinpointed, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I kind of see it as a positive, no filters, because there's nothing to clog up and there's nothing to maintain, which is a bonus.
So Colin and Sandra, if you want to unmute yourselves and ask your questions, please.
Oh yeah, hello, thank you. I wonder if you would mind telling us, James and Hannah, roughly, what this work cost and how long you had to move out for as well.
So, well, it was a lot of money. It was, we spent over £200,000 on it, which we had to get the mortgage for, and we'll pay off. But we felt it was justified in that it allows us to stay in the city centre. So the other option was to look to move to a bigger house, and also because we wanted to invest in all these bits. So we can talk about prices for particular bits. There was a significant, so the heat pump was of the order of £11,000. I mean, most of the other stuff was all lumped together in terms of how we paid for it. But the other thing I mentioned earlier was I hadn't appreciated the cost. Like, we paid a lot of structural engineer costs and things beforehand. So there was I think over £20,000 worth of fees before we got the mortgage, which was something we had to find them. I hadn't got that money at that stage, so that was the challenge financially. And then in terms of moving out, so we actually rented another house. We actually rented the house next door. Margaret was saying a lot of our street is landlords. So we went and lived next door for, was it 9 months? Tim, was it 7, 8 months?
Tim was very good, that it was going to be 9 months, and it was, apart from then COVID came along, but that only delayed things by a month, which we were quite impressed with, really, given that.
Yes, we should say that Tim was well ahead by February. So then when COVID came along, he also was really well organized to get someone on site virtually every day, but socially distanced. So the job really never stopped during COVID. It just carried on slower, and we managed to get James and Hannah in with a couple of weeks delay, really, given that there was an 8-week lockdown.
I think it was planned to be 9 months, and it would have been if it hadn't been for COVID, but I think in the end it was 10 months.
I think we had one person on site I think we had about a week or so where we didn't have anybody on, and then we had one person on site just trying to get different jobs finished on. I think maybe Marius fitted the kitchen, carried on because there was nobody. So I think that was, we more or less carried on.
But the extent of the work meant we'd really felt we had to move out. Like, it would have been totally impossible to do without.
You could not have stayed in.
And I think also the size of the house as well. If you've got a big house, then you've got more options. But I was just, because I think there was one photo showing when you were showing the heat pump at the back. There was a photo showing the fence panel missing.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out was not my fault. It's because they were living next door and coming across.
Yeah, so we left it so we could move between the houses, and
it was a hell of a boon from a builder's point of view, because we've talked about the problems of the installation of different systems in a tiny space and the roof and everything else, but just one of the you're in a mid-terrace, or it's what's become a mid-terrace with very limited access, and you've got to get concrete to the back, and you've got to get steels in and out. There's a, you know, you're having that access through the next door neighbour's garden was a massive help.
Mm. So Jane's got a question coming up as well. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, Jane. About summer humidity, I think it was.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were saying James. I think the question may have actually been answered, but in the summer when it's humid outside, does the ventilation system, does that mean inside the air is dry and it's not as humid or not? I think earlier you said the same air, the air that comes in is what you get.
Correct. That's right, Jane. Yeah, the system doesn't have a dehumidifying function. If it's 79% humidity outside and 21 degrees, that's what you're going to get inside. I think the key point actually is to make sure that any excess moisture that's being produced in the house is being dealt with. So we know that if the humidity sensors are actually virtually fully open, any additional moisture in that property is going to be exited and dealt with. It's not going to be an issue, and we haven't got heat that we're worried about losing either necessarily, because it's coming in at a good temperature. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it'd be quite interesting if I did a session for you guys at some stage, and maybe not specific to the product, you know, to ventilation in general, but maybe touch on these things as well. It could be quite interesting. I'm amazed the amount of questions that are coming through.
Yeah, I had a leak and mold. I took out the wardrobe I inherited, and behind there was lots of mold. I knew there was the leak, and the leak was fixed. So when I do my building work, I'm really keen to stop that. I think that's a better way than having a mold treatment in the house, you know, to get rid of all the mold that's here. Because if there's no environment for them to live, they'll just die themselves, won't they, surely?
Well, yeah, mold you have to kill off once you've dealt with the reason why there's an excess moisture in the property in the first place. There's actually a great little link that I often send out from the UK Centre of Moisture in Buildings, and it's just basically I think about a 7-minute video that looks at mold. You're nodding, Margaret. Have you seen that one? I think it's a very...
Yes, I have. It's on the retrofit coordinator course.
Yeah.
Vince worked with Peter Rickaby, who wrote the retrofit coordinator, the retrofit specification for the country on Thamesmead, where they had mold like you've never seen. So he's very experienced in this.
Yeah.
So I'm going
Okay, so that means I can look for that video link. And the other question was about a wood burner. Can you have a wood burner in this environment? I mean, obviously you can't in where James, you two lived, because I imagine it's smoke free there. But if you're in the country or somewhere where you can burn seasoned wood, how does that work with the ventilation? Because that does create dust and particles and bits and bobs, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you look at Part J, which deals with the sort of extract of chimneys and things like that, if the wood burner is open, so it doesn't have its own balanced flue, the requirement is that you need to have a fixed opening for ventilation, and that will be in relation to the kilowattage of that wood burner. In terms of particles that are being dragged around, I mean, you'd expect most of those to go up through the chimney just because of the draw. I don't know if you've got any further comments to add on that, Tim.
Well, certainly I would recommend. We've done quite a few wood burners in projects over the years, and I've always, if they're not direct feed, as in the air is not feeding directly into the wood burner, so that the air is not coming into the house, I would always recommend putting your feed into the hearth. So if you've got floors up for other reasons, or this, that, and the other, run a pipe under the floor to an air brick outside, and run it up to a control vent that's in the hearth, right next to the fire. So when the fire starts drawing air, it's only drawing it a foot, because the biggest problem for me, you know, you may have hay fever and particles and all that kind of thing may be a big problem, but if you've got a lovely warm house and then you draw cold air from an air brick that's on the right hand wall over there, and it drags across your feet as you're sat watching the telly with your wood burner on, your feet feel cold whether your house is warm or not. So that was I mean, that's the main reason, to get the air source for the fire as close to the fire as possible.
I think would I be right in saying it can be all contained in? I had mine installed last year, and I understand it's all contained in.
A lot more now, a direct feed, so the air is directly into the back of the fire, so that it's drawn from the outside into the fire, and then it and then exhausts out the flue. So and that's is obviously a much better way to go, but many aren't. If you have if it's under, I think it's under 5 kilowatt, you don't need an external source unless you have created a house where you have got, you know, if you're purely on mechanical ventilation and you've got no air movement, then you're going to need a source of air to your fire, because you're going to create yourself other problems.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think now we need to draw the session to a close. I'm conscious that the webinar team in particular have kids to feed and other places to be. But
can I just say one quick thing, because there was just to correct something that was earlier, because James, just in case he stood next to it, when the sprinkler system goes off, the water does come out of those little metal things.
Oh, okay.
It shoots out, it's got a little sideways thing, and then it sprays out in a jet like that across the room. And if you could go back, there was the literature on it, it'll show you the spray pattern and where you could stand in the corner and stay dry.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so anyway, it's great to hear all the discussion, and we'll certainly take the feedback about potentially maybe having a focused ventilation session. There are other sessions for those of you that are still interested, so please have a look at the link that I posted and consider booking onto another session and asking your questions perhaps that you didn't get answered this time. But thank you so much, particularly to Hannah and James for donating their time, and for the whole webinar team, in fact. So thank you to everybody, and I will be closing down the session in just a minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Great, that was a great session. Lovely to see that.